Hello, everyone. Good evening. A warm welcome to the lecture series, the second edition of our lecture series for the service design. So today we have Pramod Khambete with us. So I would like to welcome him for the talk. So Dr. Pramod has completed his PhD in service design and experience design is in 2012 from IDC School of Design, IIT Bombay. And since he is a service and user experience design consultant and adjunct professor at IDC, IIT Bombay from 2010 onwards, and he has worked as a head of user interactions design group at Tech Mahindra Limited for 10 plus years. He was also chief manager at Nelco. He is currently actively working with the social sector groups to make the impact on ground. He'll be sharing today with all his experience and that how service design can make a difference in emerging market like India, especially in the social sector. Thank you very much, Pramod, for accepting our invitation and giving this lecture. I'm sure everybody will enjoy. And I would also like to extend my warm welcome to all of you for this lecture. Thank you very much. Over to Pramod. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so thank you and hello to everyone. My today's topic is participatory service design in the wild. And I'm sure some of you must be familiar with this term, what in the wild means, that it is not in the lab setting. It is the real world application of participatory service design. And I'm particularly chosen one specific case study uh, about an organization with which I've been involved for last 3 years, and how the participatory design approach and spirit can be applied in such a kind of context settings. So that's broadly the thrust of what I'm talking about. So it is, as I have written here, as you can read, essentially my reflections. It is not a formal case study as such, so I'm not claiming that there will be some generalizable knowledge across the world or any such thing. However, I am quite confident that the lessons which I'll share with you and my own understanding, as well as whatever I have experienced and my reflections, will perhaps help some of you in your work, whether it's in the corporate sector or elsewhere. Okay, so let's. My first 4 slides are going to be about participatory design, primarily aimed at people who are not familiar with participatory design, so that we are all on the same page. So for people who are familiar, this might not be anything new to them. So please bear with me for that. Okay. So essentially, it's a way of looking at design from the I mean, we talk about user-centered design and thinking at the issue from the user's point of view and so on. But this is a real active way of doing it, in the sense that involving the users directly in the design process and being with them and doing design together. So it originated in Scandinavia, and the idea was to empower workers to decide the solutions for problems which they face. And then the idea extended, and people saw the potential, and it was felt that it can be used elsewhere and tackle modern big issues, and so on. So much research also happened after that, and then people identified various strengths of this approach. So, for example, the foundation of this approach is building trust and ownership. So essentially, there's a bond of trust between the end users and the designers, and that enables a very conducive atmosphere and conducive way of approaching the problems which they face. So that's the first foundational kind of advantage. And then coming out of that and involving the users directly in the design process leads to some other very interesting and important advantages. So, for example, you can come up with creative and novel solutions because ultimately the end users understand the nuances of their situations and the issues which they are facing, as well as that they are able to identify the solutions which can really make a difference to them, and therefore the solutions become far more user centric and relevant. As a corollary to that, or as an after effect of that, the solutions that emerge out of such an approach, they can lead to greater potential of real world deployment. So it doesn't remain merely in within quote lab setting, uh, so that's one big advantage. However, as can happen with any approach as it evolves, you start also observing its limitations. So there's nothing in no approach towards design is perfect. So therefore, people started discovering, and which is the process of refinement of the approach and making it more appropriate for uh, a wider acceptance and wider application. So some of the critiques that came out is that initially, because it started from the technology field, then that somehow was never given up and it remained confined to that. The other was people started having very low ambition, involve the users for something which might not be all that significant, and look for short-term outcomes. That also started happening, perhaps. You can call it as a growing up pangs, if you will, and then superficial participation. So involve users. See, it's very difficult to involve users, as you will perhaps see as we go further, and to maintain that kind of sustained relationship with them, and therefore perhaps some people resorted to some token participation, of the users, and in general, uh, issues which can happen in any teamwork, like power imbalance, uh, misalignment with the cultural and contextual issues, and so on. So these are critiques. Please understand, this is not as if people are rejecting this approach. Okay, and it's a good process to come up with what are the gaps or what are the issues which we need to address. Other very important issue is it's very time consuming and costly. It's very difficult to get users back to, I mean, to wherever you are doing this design work together all the time, because after all, they have their lives to live and earnings to earn and so on. So these were some other issues which were identified. And then obviously people reflected on that. And please, I enclosed a bibliography at the end, and that is an extremely partial and short bibliography. If you search, then you'll find plenty of material on this. So there are some recommendations which were given, is that broaden the focus, go beyond technology or small problems and try to address broad societal challenges. Then contextualize it, so don't go for any templatized kind of approach. Uh, Contextualize. You can go for hybrid models, like use other methods and other models and so on. Uh, First, pay attention to strengthening the partnership with the stakeholders, and by stakeholders we mean people who go beyond the actual end users, because they play a very active role in ultimately making those solutions real for the people who are going to benefit from them. And many a times those are the people who will implement it or will have a big role in implementing it and all that. So make it truly inclusive to even bring them to the table. Then have research practice balance. So some things that had happened is that people approach it from the research point of view, and then how it will actually be practiced in real life, that is somewhat uh, you know neglected. So then address implementation and scalability. I mean, it's no good to just come up with a solution and then not worry about implementation and scalability, because as we all know, any design when it goes into real world will always reveal some new issues which need to be tackled. So therefore, you can think a bit forward looking about how this might be implemented, what might happen if the solution goes in the real world, and so on. And of course, balance scalability and participation depth. We briefly touched on that. So just keep this in mind that this is the brief history, and where we start off as far as our own experience is concerned. So first, a little bit about the participatory, our partner organization and who were involved, in this journey. So the name of the organization is it's rather long, and some of you might find it perhaps a little difficult to remember fully. So it is Savitribai Phule Mahila Ekatma Samaj Mandal. It is named after one of the major social reformer in Maharashtra in India, and so she was one of the leading reformers in the past century, and so it started in 1994, and last 30 years it has been working with the vulnerable communities in a region in Maharashtra, India, uh, formerly known as Aurangabad. Now it is called as Sambhajinagar. So in that region, or Marathwada region in general, which is that place and the region around it. So they have been working there. It's a reasonably large organization, entirely focused on making a difference on the ground in that region. Okay. I'm henceforth going to refer to them as SAFU, pronounced as SAFU, as I just now said, so that it is easier to, talk about them. So this is where they are located. They are located at a place, as I said, called Chhatrapati Sambhajinagar. It used to be called as Aurangabad till recently, and this is where it is located in the on the map of India and Maharashtra. It is a mix of both cultural and industrial kind of environment. So it is close to several historical and heritage places, as I'm sure many of you must be aware, places like Ajanta and Ellora, which are close by. But at the same time, there is a vibrant industry also. So it's a mix of both. There's one particularly notable product of this region. It is called as a Paithani sari. It is from a place called Paithan. It originated probably several centuries ago, and the technique which the craftsmen use has been acknowledged as something very unique. And these are very expensive silk saris. Okay, typically price as you can see, something like $500 onwards. And just to contextualize the people who benefit from work of SAFU, their 6 months earnings is something like that. So you can see the kind of contrast about or the kind of challenges which these people might be facing in their real life. This region also happens to be very arid and quite prone to having very less monsoon, water scarcity, and so on. So it's a place where a lot of difference can be made to the people's lives. And SAFU is involved in so many things. I have given this QR code, and you can of course go and look up their website to get an idea of the full spectrum of the work which they do. And so this is the background, and this is where we started working with them. Okay, some of the important things I'll discuss a little bit towards the end about the organization attributes and how one might want to adopt their approaches. So that's why this slide is important from that point of view. They have some very very important strengths which which we recognize. So one thing or understood is that one thing is clarity of vision. You know, they know exactly what they want to do, what kind of social change they want to come bring about, which are the communities they are serving. But at the same time, it is a broad vision, which means that they keep on adding newer issues and newer communities whom they will be able to make some difference, for whom they will be able to make some difference. Okay. One very important part from from participatory design point of view, and which is, in my opinion, have been involved and have interacted with several such organizations. One very important part of their culture is a strong culture of mentorship. You know, so they are not only willing, but they are even seeking mentorship from people who they think can contribute to their own efforts. Okay, so that open-mindedness is very important, which is not something which is very common for a variety of reasons and not necessarily malicious reasons. Okay, so there are some very legitimate reasons why people may do something else, but here, for us, from our point of view, this was a very, very important plus factor. Then their willingness to explore new approaches as they expand their scope and the depth of their services and systematic functioning, etc. Okay. And last point also is important: commitment to capacity building. In short, not making it person-centric but organization-centric. And how do we build the capacity of the organization to serve the people better? That is the approach, which are some very important strengths and which are quite conducive to participatory design. However, like all social organizations or NGOs, as they are commonly called, working in the social sector, there are a lot of constraints, and which is something which you have to recognize, is that often they have to prioritize immediate impact. You know, some problem happens or some immediate social issue needs attention, and naturally the resources will be diverted to that. People's efforts will be diverted to that. Then always such organizations will face manpower inadequacy. Uh, Time, people are very much engaged in the actual hands-on work, and they naturally have to give priority to that as well, because ultimately they have to serve the community, and financial constraints are perpetually there. And then there is something very interesting which we discovered over a period of time, is that there is this corporate social responsibility funding, which is very common in India these days. Now, those funds come with some very specific requirements, which are honestly not necessarily always aligned to how we might want to look at a problem from a designer point of view. You know, and so how do you navigate that part and so on. So in short, what I want to point here is that there are strengths and constraints both in any such setting that one goes into, and you have to navigate through those constraints and leverage the strengths. That is the broad approach you have to follow. And therefore, what we did, these are the kind of three broad, you can say, uh, themes, if you will, is that we followed the spirit of participatory design. We did not follow any prescriptions as such. You know, we drew on the knowledge from variety of sources, but we did not convert that into any prescriptive way of interacting or prescriptive way of doing participatory design. We adopted a very flexible approach and continuously kept on adopting to or adapting our approach to the situation. So as I mentioned, what I'm talking about is the reflections on the journey of last 3 years, and which is continuing. So therefore, we had to adopt continuously, and then we took a rather holistic approach, and I'll explain this more in detail as we go further. Rather than sticking to the conventional bounds of what design means, and where design ends. So we went beyond that, and it will be clear as we go further. Okay. So what we did is that however, we use service design as an anchor. We started off with service design. How do we how do we make what they are offering as services to their end beneficiaries better, more effective, uh, make the experience of those services better for those end beneficiaries, and so on. That was the basic starting point, as well as, of course, use service design as a way to come up with new ideas and new possibilities. Uh, then we always kept a capacity building focus. In short, we did not want to uh, we wanted to transfer and build build knowledge within the organization, knowledge, skills, and the overall capacity to design or look at the situation from a within code designerly point of view, and therefore leverage the designerly approach. Okay. Another important uh, uh, you know thing which we kept in mind is that we will not only go for innovation as the primary motive or developing new services alone as primary motive, but we will also look at opportunities for incremental change, and incremental positive change uh, cumulatively will make a difference, so we kind of followed that philosophy. uh, as a part of this capacity building, we also looked at how do we change the participants' perspectives towards their own way of looking at it, enrich those perspectives, and so on. And as I mentioned earlier, keep it holistic. Introduce knowledge and techniques from allied fields. Because as you know, service design is not only design, right? I mean, it is about designing several interconnected systems or developing taking a systems kind of perspective. So we recognize that and introduce knowledge and techniques from allied fields as well. Then we leverage the partner strengths. Involve knowledgeable proxies. So let me explain this a little bit. So as we talked about earlier, involving end users all the time, and particularly the kind of end users who are served by SAFU. Let us say, for example, women in slums who are not well educated. Some of them might be illiterate, and involving them all the time. And even those women will be all the time more worried about, am I losing time or am I compromising my livelihood by participating in this? So how do we balance that? How do we involve them? So one big strength which the organization has is a very deep rooted network of field workers. So we use the field workers as proxies. Of course, we did not ignore the end users, but we use them as a proxies because our premise was that they know the lives of the end beneficiaries in and out. They understand the nuances of the context and situations, and therefore they can serve as good proxies for participation on behalf of the users, uh, and continue the participation over a longer period of time. Then we adapted to the constraints, time, and so on, and we followed a dynamic and flexible approach. Okay. Uh, Last, these 2 points are also important. We understand and we recognize that the visible social change takes time, which means that we may come up with a solution, but we may see the result after, say, 1 year or 2 years. So we recognize that. And therefore, we were right from the beginning, I and my you can say, traveler in this journey, we were prepared to engage for a long duration. So we went with that mindset, and we also did not look for quick results, which was frankly something which uh, paid off very well. And so this is broadly the approach which we followed. And the people who are involved in this is, of course, as I said, I had a very able partner in this. His name is Kiran Sabnis, and we collectively, him as well as me, have 70 plus years of actual hands-on practice and academic experience from diverse fields. So design, service design, technology, business management, and so on. And together we have worked with several social organizations for last 15 years. So we have a good chemistry. Along with that, of course, there were people from Safut's side who are deeply involved. Uh, the picture which you see here, 4 participants, is not the only people, so there are many more people involved. And the big advantage from their side was that all of them were embedded in the target communities. They had very deep understanding of the lives of the end users or end beneficiaries. uh, they had already developed bonds with the communities, which were very strong, and uh, these people were considered as trusted people, so which means that the end users will open up and so on. And indispensable to this journey was the commitment of the Safu leadership, uh, and who themselves have a lot of hands-on knowledge, and they have deep understanding of the issues. They are committed to change, etc., etc. And as I said earlier, as an overall organization characteristics is that they are also uh, committed and willing to look for new ways to to enhance their impact and so on. So this turned out to be a very fruitful combination. And as we moved forward, it helped us at every juncture. So this is the broad journey of our engagement. We started with familiarizing. So even though I was familiar with, okay, so just to put it in the context, though this organization, SAFU, is located in Sambhajinagar and Marathwada region, uh, I stay in Pune, which means that we are not co-located. We have to travel about 5 6 hours to reach that place. You know, so which means that obviously we can't be there all the time. And but we continued our interactions by actually meeting them from time to time, like say every couple of months, spending time with them, as well as working from Pune, using, obviously, as you know, I mean, these days it's not so difficult. So you can always have online meetings and online offline combination and so on. So but coming back, we first spent time in familiarizing with this entire milieu and entire context, including understanding the organization, and of course helping the organization understand us. So uh, please understand, from any such, not just SAFU, but any such organization's point of view, somebody coming from outside and trying to you know, kind of parachuting themselves and trying to tell them, oh, you can do this, you can do that, etc., can be very stressful, because uninformed advice often is problematic. So there has to be a period where you build a bond of trust here also. So we visited, we understood, we went to the field with them and so on. And at some point in time, it was decided that yes, we will launch this participatory design journey together. And then we commenced. And then broadly, these are the stages: engage, design, and deploy. So we engaged with the actual participants. Some key projects or key um, focus areas were identified. We started working with those people and so on. As I mentioned already, is that face-to-face interactions, workshops, and as well as remotely having interactions with them and so on. As we went further and further, naturally everything did not work as we expected. Some things worked, some things did not work, and then we slowly started our journey of adapting to our based on our greater understanding of how we can make our participatory design or participatory collaboration far more effective. And that journey is continuing. So this is broadly the span. From the point of view of the participants and the organization, I think they went through these phases. That is, first getting exposed to this new approach, then learning, then internalizing, and application. Application along with us or independently, both. Uh, and then naturally the feedback loop, which goes back to strengthen and correct the earlier stages. So this is broadly a kind of two-pronged or two paths of different participants, you can say. Okay. And okay, so this is what happened. I touched upon this earlier, is that primarily we started it as a service design or design as the primary track. We started approaching the issues and the potential solutions from this point of view. As we went further, uh, and as I said earlier, and as you all think of everything, you have to think of technology, you have to think of what kind of something is needed for making any service successful. So we decided to add two more tracks to our efforts. So one is technology and complementary knowledge. Obviously, knowledge is not static, right? Newer and newer things come up, newer technologies come up. The people's adoption of technology, those levels change, and so on. So we wanted to keep in line with that and integrate. So uh, we added this another kind of parallel track, and then we also added strategy and process enhancement track. Why this is necessary? So as you can very well imagine, I mean, you may say that, okay, here is something, here is an opportunity, and I'm going to do uh, whatever we are doing in this different manner. I'm going to introduce these new touch points, or I'm going to introduce these new journeys, or whatever. But unless the organization's processes and backend activities do not match that, all that will not work. So we said, okay, let us do that as well. So these are some of the things which we did. For example, as newer and newer technologies came, so we discovered that people are very familiar with using WhatsApp and so on. So we started, okay, how do we leverage that? Then, of course, then suddenly there was this big, what you can say, paradigm shift or big revolution of Gen AI, Chat GPT, and all these technologies came on the scene. So we started investigating how might we be able to utilize them better and all that. So you will see that we never remained statically committed to only one path. We started incorporating all these new things. Also, parallelly, we commence this kind of activities is uh, change the ways of working at the back end. Can we even um, do data collection and analysis better, and so on? So these are the other tracks. This might give an impression that these are kind of independent tracks. They are interwoven tracks. Even though I am showing them as three different strands, this is actually all interwoven. you know and the modes of engagement we had, as I mentioned, is that on-site, off-site workshops with the people, both knowledge sharing as well as co-working and co-design workshops. Then, as and when needed, we invited experts to complement the learning, because obviously, I mean, we did not know everything. So we recognize that, okay, here somebody else needs to come in and provide their own expertise. So that has been another part. So in short, broadening the scope and the actors within quote involved in the participation and participatory design. Then we did periodic trainings also. So for example, as you know, I mean, let us say the Chat GPT or Gen AI came, suddenly became an important technology not to be ignored. So we conducted some workshops how they might be able to use that for, say, for example, um, ideation, or looking at what they are doing and then what are the alternate ways of doing it and all that. So make ChatGPT as one additional participant, so to say, in our journey. ChatGPT as in generative AI as a participant in our journey. And as I said, the regular video calls and so on to complement all this. So all sorts of possible engagements is what we did. Okay. So I'm just going to share just a few, two, three, four actually, ideas or concepts which came up and which some have been partly implemented, fully implemented, and some are in progress. So the first line is important. As they say, don't miss the wood for the trees. I mean, don't miss the uh, wood. Uh, don't miss the larger picture. But you have to also attack the trees. You have to ensure that the trees also grow, so that small ideas are also nurtured, and small ideas are nurtured, implemented, and then one acquires a lot of experience. The team acquires a lot of experience of working with those problems, those ideas, and implementing and so on. So we focused always on even incremental and micro improvements, along with coming with some potentially transformative ideas. So here are some, and therefore some examples might appear trivial to you, but I will explain a bit why even apparently small ideas can become very big. So one big problem in that region is, for example, rural alcohol addiction and relapse prevention. And these are people who are located in remote villages. So some of the villages which we visited are remote village comprises of something like 1,000 people, and lots of people live on their own farms and so on. And how do we access them? One of the important part after an addict becomes a kind of de-addict or within within the community and some other factors which were useful or which could be leveraged, parts of the context. So one was, of course, the community was sensitized. The picture which you see here is from the field where these kids in that village were preparing for one of the festivals. They were preparing to enact one play about addiction, de-addiction, and all that. Then the human touch. You have to have human touch. So Safu already has a set of people who are lots of times ex-addicts. They call it as Manas Mitra. And I want to dwell a little bit about this term Manas Mitra. This is slightly different from conceptual, and this is where the cultural and contextual, aspects come into picture. So the term Mitra is different. I mean, it is loosely translated as friend, and the term manas means mind. Okay, so it's a friend of the mind, and it is not friend of you as such. It's a friend of your mind, and which is a much broader and contextually appropriate concept. So these people have lived experience. Why I'm pointing this is that there is this concept of sponsor in, say, for example, Western cultures, alcoholic anonymous, and so on. Now the sponsor is supposed to, for example, play a role in a way at a distance of supporting the person who is trying to remain sober. Here in Indian culture, for example, if Manas Mitra visits the house and kind of inquires every day, it will not be seen as intrusion to privacy or intrusion to the person's freedom. So these are the kind of cultural context one has to keep in mind, and this was leveraged by Safu. And other important thing is there is remote access, remote access through mobiles. India has, as if there are any people from elsewhere in the world, one of the cheapest, in fact, if not the cheapest, data access, and so you can leverage that. So all this was used by Sapu, and solution was already decided to work further on that. How can remote one-to-one conversation and monitoring can happen? Because as you remember, you may remember, I said already, there is always a resource crunch. So how do we monitor this remotely? How do we use WhatsApp for getting feedbacks on their current condition? Use Manas Mitra, who can actually go and give some kind of proactive support and so on. Uh, so we started with that. In the bargain, a lot of data is getting collected. Uh, Early signs of stress are getting identified. It is both remote plus on-site support through a human touch that is possible, and so on. So this was uh, one of the projects within Code which we took forward. I mean, and when I'm saying we, always interpret that Safu and us together. Then this will be trivial, and I'll explain why. So Safu runs computer education centers in slums. And the students in the slum, they come and they learn some basic computer skills plus acquire some certifications which they can use for getting a job and so on. Now important part here is and of course it is at extremely low cost, but yet how do you reach out to them? Even though you are co-located in the slums, it's not always possible. So in short, if you leave it only to them, then they may or may not come. They may not even be aware, and so on. So currently what was happening is that largely it was through word of mouth, but then we decided how might we leverage the local culture and local context. So for example, in India, and this is little different from the Western world, is that people do read newspapers. Lots of people read newspapers every day, including in slums. And then therefore, those are used as a kind of channel for sending leaflets or flyers to them. So which was leveraged. And smartphones are quite prevalent in India. However low end, it is still a smartphone. And people are familiar with with the use of QR codes. This is something which is somewhat unique in India, because thanks to the unified payment interface system, almost everybody is familiar with a QR code. Scan QR code and something happens. So how might we leverage that? So one very simple idea came, is that in the flyers which would go out in the newspapers, why not include a QR code which will in turn launch a small Google form? And then it will ask some very basic question: what are you interested in, and what is your education? Just 2-3 questions, and then get them to send that data. So now, when, for example, if the person doesn't call you up for 2 days, you can call them, but you can call them with some prior information rather than just making a cold call, and that helped quite a lot. And so, as I mentioned, you launch a Google form, and you can have an informed conversation and so on. And the training program operations are running at full strength now. So let me tell you what is the significance of this. It's just not possible for a resource-starved organization like SAFU or NGOs in general in India uh, to waste any of their resources. So now this center is established, it is there, and suppose their capacity is say 30 people, and only 5 people enroll. They still have to, train them, and they have to do the commitment, fulfill their commitment. So it doesn't become a financially viable proposition. Okay. Uh, so having that class full has multiple effects. One is that, of course, from SAFU's point of view, it becomes a sustainable model. From the end result point of view, more people get trained, and therefore there is a greater chance of more people getting livelihood. So these are all interlinked benefits, and so a small change, apparently a trivial intervention, but coming out of this kind of collective collaborative thinking can make a big difference. Then here is something which is somewhat big. Okay, and there's a nice story with this. So we all know that there's a stigma, at least in India, definitely, about children who are specially who have special needs. So SAFU already has one center for it's a school, you can say, for such kids. Now look at it from the lifetime of that kid. You know, they acquire education, they kind of develop or somewhat overcome their challenges and so on. What next? How do we ensure livelihood for them after that? So this is where a real long-term view and looking at your end users within quote uh, from a long-term perspective becomes important. How do you do that? There, came in this from within SAFU. There was one funder who was willing to fund, uh, but the basic mindset was there to leverage that opportunity. That could we run some stalls which can sell organic fruits, vegetables, etc., etc., and which will be manned by these kids who are now grown up. You know, so one such stall already is operational, and now, please understand the significance of this. This will appear as, again, a very conventional solution, but it has so many benefits. One is that not only livelihood is created for that person, but also there are a lot of lateral benefits. When people come buy at the stall, maybe a lot of misconceptions are removed. Uh, Even watching those kids actually, uh, kids means there are no more kids. I mean, they are more than teenagers. So they actually dealing with people and all that, that removes a lot of stigma, brings awareness. And there is one very big strategic importance of this. So the plan is to, uh, the first one is being piloted, and the plan is to have 20 more spread across the city. Uh, just look at from a design point of view and think big. Could they serve as kind of hubs for local commerce or hyper local commerce? You know, now that is a big picture, and it is very much possible if we take this further and expand it, these treating these as hubs and then expand it using uh, social commerce. Okay, there is another important part here, uh, where the ecosystem of Safu's work itself was leveraged. So Safu uh, currently has is mentoring with about 30 odd what is known as farmer producer organizations, which is a unique structure in India. I'll encourage you to go and look up what it is. Essentially, it is a collective of farmers who grow specific kind of crops and come together and get the benefits of that. Um, uh, you might be familiar with this, what is known as cooperative movement, but this is little different. So SAFU is mentoring 30 of them. So this provides a channel for their produce as well. So collectively, it has impact and it has influence or benefits across the ecosystem. Here is one very interesting, and I have deliberately included this. So we there is one unique problem that in slums there are a lot of single women, and the numbers were staggering when we went and met them, and the kind of uh, issues which it's honestly it's very disturbing to hear their stories, you know, and what kind of things happen. So they are either widowed, separated, with young kids, low education levels, and so on, Uh, so, what was thought as an idea came out of our collective thinking is that, but of course, there are a lot of positives as well, that they are together. They live in a very uh, close proximity of each other. They can do some collective efforts and so on. So we came up with an idea that can we leverage SAFU's existing programs of, say, for example, cooking or tailoring education centers, and give that education to these women at their doorstep. So this idea came up, and we were quite excited. So how to do that? So one of the triggers was that we realized in conversations with these women is that they can't even afford to go to the center, even though the center exists, say, 5 kilometers away. They can't take a vehicle and go there because that is too expensive. So, however, it currently paused. Why? A, there are funding constraints. Because ultimately it's impossible to fund everything through own funds for an organization like SAPU. Then CSR funding looks at such things from their own lens. There has to be availability of trainers and so on. So this is not given up, but it is currently halted. Why I have brought up this example is that you will encounter, when we work with such kind of situations and such contexts, issues which uh, are at one point in time appear unsolvable. But we should then not give that up. If the idea is good, we should take that forward, try to overcome those difficulties, and so on. So I'm personally, and I think Safu also is hopeful that this will take off, but currently it is in halt. So I hope these 4 examples might have given you an idea of the spectrum of work that can happen through participatory design when all the relevant stakeholders are committed to coming up with impactful solutions. Okay. Uh, so now we are entering a phase, what I will call as institutionalization of this initiative. So instead of keeping it as one-off or whatever, how do we continue that? So we, of course, in this journey discovered some constraints, and how do we tackle those constraints and take advantage of that, overcome them. So, uh, so we realized few things. I'm not going to read out everything. I think this recording is going to be available. You can go through. So people are not able to devote in adequate time, or other priorities take over. Then somewhat informal way of working which we had, this participatory design and so on, but funding budgetary constraints and so on. Exact mentorship as needed should be available and so on. So we have come up with what we are calling as virtual innovation incubator. What that means is that we are creating a platform for innovation without creating a department. It is not going to be an R&D department, or it is not going to be an innovation center which is permanently there. But we will create a kind of virtual team structure where people will come together, they'll work on a problem, come up with an idea, solutions, etc., etc. Take it forward up to the pilot, prove it, and then go for implementation. So temporary project teams, rotating leadership, flexible structure. This is the broad concept, and teams can then dedicate some specified time for this, apart from their own normal work and so on. Provide access to mentors and so on. Okay, so and this is one very important. We are looking at this not as simply a solutions-oriented kind of framework, but more of a knowledge generation or knowledge acquisition framework, whereby no ideas will be rejected in the conventional sense, but the guidance and support will be provided so that those ideas, teams can refine those ideas and so on, and also in the process, they acquire knowledge. So this, some of you will be familiar with this adaptation of what is commonly called as stage gate funnel. So we kind of modified that for our purpose and we move further. And we also created some, obviously you have to create a structure for this, organizational structure for this, how it will happen. So who will be the key stakeholders, how the teams will be formed, how they will be supported and guided and so on. We have also created some simple, using existing simple tools like Excel and all that, about how we uh, assess and guide, as well as enable the teams to uh, use the same structure for learning themselves on their own and so on. Okay, so this is the current state of this initiative. Is that it is moving further. It is, I mean, it is moving fairly at a good pace. There are already some workshops have been held to uh, generate ideas together for certain specified problems and so on. Then uh, uh, some projects are in pilot, some ideas are in pilot stage, and I mean, this whole framework itself is being piloted in a way, and so on. Okay, and we are quite hopeful. This is working reasonably well so far. We are also discovering some ways in which it can be improved. So that's what has happened. Where are we now? So this is the broad way in which we have progressed. Is that we started from a tentative kind of engagement. Uh, Obviously, early days, nobody's sure exactly how it is going to unfold, and we started working with lot of optimism and a lot of, you can say, patience, if you will, and so on. And then the current state is that there is firm commitment from all sides. People have acquired alternate perspectives. Um, they are able to comprehend situations differently and understand the nuances much better compared to earlier, and so on. In the meantime, during this journey, also some tangible outcomes have come. So I touched upon some of them earlier. So it is not as if it is only some kind of a knowledge building enterprise at only. So we are getting some practical implementable solutions as well, which is making a difference. Okay, just to give some examples, I'm not going to read all of these participant feedbacks. There's plenty. In fact, there are pages and pages of it. I've just extracted a few. So, for example, how they are currently getting benefits out of the common techniques and common frameworks that we use, like journey mapping, ecosystem mapping, and so on, and changes in attitude, like getting confidence that all problems can be solved. It expanding the way of their, I mean, the changing the way, I mean, and how itself. So this is the part of the kind of participatory and our contribution, you can say, in a way. Then even some uh, different benefits, so introduce GPT as in example, essentially generative AI tools. They are able to, they have started using different function about ideation, and so people are using it. Have changed significantly of both in as well as the the benefit by through those changes which have which are making a difference. This is one of the most beautiful that came with what I learned, not just in my work but in my personal life. So and so on. Okay, so I'll quickly go to the learnings and suggestions. I think I have overshot the time, perhaps, I don't know. Um, So first thing is that finding the fit with the organization and you, between the organization and you. So I've broadly done this as a 2x2 matrix. So there will be right from lone warriors who are doing excellent work, um, and in general, our experience suggests that it's uh, difficult to do participatory design with them. I mean, these are great people who do fantastic work, but they have already found their own niche and they have their own ways which work in those specific contexts, and they would like to continue with that. So there are some people who have capacity to collaborate, but they are primarily concerned with scale rather than innovation. Basically, these are the different types, and you can look at it. I've broadly put down what kind of strategies one might employ while interacting with them or doing participatory design. So one is, of course, fortunately, SAFU is what I would call as mature aspirant, or they are gone beyond being an aspirant now. We started with small projects and so on. Okay. Here are some broad principles, if you will. Okay, so build on partners' tacit knowledge. Tacit knowledge is often ignored. We always think of going to the field and understanding firsthand, which is important. But partners' tacit knowledge can be great. Okay, and you have to leverage that. Uh, Go for 360 degrees design, as I mentioned. Don't think of only as a designer, but think also as a generalist. And wherever you can't contribute, get others to contribute. Be flexible. Flexibility is critical, and be humble. I think this is one very big attitudinal change which we should have, if at all change is needed. Is that once you go there, you realize that you hardly do know anything about the real world issues, particularly if you go to unfamiliar settings, and no education or anything prepares you for the complexity. And be patient. You have to be patient. You can't expect the results overnight, and therefore you have to be there for the long haul. But eventually results will appear, as we have experienced ourselves. So thanks to all these people who made all this happen and continue to help in making this taking this further. Okay. And my thanks to, here's the bibliography, but you can search. I mean, there's plenty of literature. This very short part. Thank you.
So apart from the social sector, any other thing where you feel like in the emerging markets like India, what are the opportunities where service design can be applied?
Yeah, I mean, it can be applied anywhere and everywhere, frankly. And participatory design, as I have been talking about, is not really a kind of a straight-jacketed approach, right? I mean, you can always use that spirit and adopt it to whichever situation you are in. So I think one should be really optimistic that understanding the participatory design principles and the ethos of that philosophy, you can adapt to any situation and you can use it. In fact, what I have shared with you, even though the examples or the case study within code is from social sector, um, it can be applied in corporate settings as well. I mean, even in business settings. Of course, you'll have to change or transform these learnings into something else, which is suitable for that kind of context. But as principles, it should be applicable anywhere.
Hi, Pramod. I'll just ask the question. So I just want to understand how do you convince, or what techniques do you use to engage stakeholders who are hesitant or skeptical about the process?
Yeah, I mean, you have to work with them. You have to persist and take small projects or small ideas, show them the results. Convince them to put in some efforts. I mean, there is really no what I might say as so. First and foremost, I think you have to demonstrate that you are committed to this, what you are trying to do. That you are not kind of some migratory bird that who will come and then go away and so on, So now exactly how you do that will depend on the situation, I think. So once that that is established, then things will happen, Let's start with small projects, start showing results of this approach. And then most of the times they themselves will realize that this is making a difference, and this is perhaps a different way of doing and complementary or other, more powerful, if I may say, way of looking at some of the issues which they face and so on. So there's no black and white answer to what you are asking. But broadly, you remember the first thing, that build that relationship of trust. So that is the first cornerstone, according to me. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that made sense. Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, so if there is no further questions, it's time to conclude the session and thank Professor. So thanks, Professor, for such a wonderful presentation and sharing your insightful, like the case study which you have presented. So on behalf of the ServDes team and TCS and Department of Design IIT Hyderabad, I would like to extend our heartfelt gratitude to Professor Pramod Khambete for his enlightening lecture on service design in engineering market, with a special focus which he just shared, which is on participatory service design in the wild. Professor, your insights were both thought-provoking and inspiring, specifically the case study which you have covered to explain multiple things which goes into participatory design, and your expertise and engaging delivery. I'm sure it has left a lasting impression on all of us. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and enriching our understanding in this area. I would also like to thank our audience for their participation and engagement. As a continuation to this series, I'm pleased to announce our next lecture on digital transformation through service design, which is scheduled on 17th of January 2025, which is at 5 p.m. IST. So please mark your calendar. This session will be delivered by Professor Satu Mietinen. I hope I have pronounced her name correctly. She is a distinguished professor of service design at the University of Lapland and Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Design. So we are looking forward to your participation in future sessions and continued collaborations in this enriching discussion. So we will meet again on 17th of January. Till then, good day and see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.